Welcome back, Thriftism viewers. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, so we are actually going to make some of these really cute soap kind of gifts to give out, favors. These also make great gifts for wedding showers or wedding favors, anything like that. But we thought this would be a fun idea to give out instead of candy. It can also make a great gift for your significant other. So these are about 2.5 ounces of soap, so they're like guest soap size, bigger than you'd get at a hotel, but about half the size of like a big homemade bar if you've seen those. So a few things that you'll need to get started is obviously you'll need some oils. So today we are using olive oil. I have coconut oil over here in the big drum and palm oil here in the big drum. And you can use a different combination of oils. I'll provide a link in the description down below to a calculator that'll help you figure out what kind of soap you want to make and what proportions you want to use. Another thing you'll need is lye. As you can see here, this is actually drain cleaner. You can actually find drain cleaner that is straight lye. And so if you're making a small batch of soap, this can be quite a bit cheaper than buying in bulk, which we have another drum like this of lye down in our basement, but for safety reasons we're transporting it in the small container. And then any additives that you want to use. So today we're using lilac. Fragrance oil, you can use essential oils, fragrance oils, as long as it says safe to use in soap. And you can get those at any Michael's, Joann Fabrics, Hobby Lobby, places like that. You can also bulk order them online, which is what we have been doing. Again, I'll provide some links to that. You can also use some colorant, and I'll tell you when to put the colorant in if you were going to use some. We're not using any today because we're making just plain white soap. Your soap won't turn out white if you're using a fragrance with a lot of vanilla. Vanilla will make it brownish or at least off-white if it's a low vanilla content. The fragrance and colorants will speed up your trace, so we'll keep that in mind as we get to that point. A few other things you need. A nice stainless steel pot here. Make sure it's a big enough size for the amount that you're putting in it. And I like to use stainless steel just because with the lye, I don't want it to etch anything. I don't want it to, wear off any of the coatings on our other pans, so that's why that's great. We also need a mixing bowl or dish for our lye and water. Again, we're using glass, a Pyrex dish here. You can use stainless steel for this as well. We just happen to like the Pyrex ones for this purpose. I wouldn't use plastic as it can eat away the plastic and some of that plastic ends up in your soap then. But be careful, it may etch whatever you're using, so make sure it's not a nice serving dish. Obviously you'll need a spoon to stir the oils and the lye together, a spatula for when you're getting it into the mold. A hand blender is nice. It's not necessary, but it will take you a very long time to reach trace without a hand blender. So it's really nice to have. Otherwise, if you don't want to invest in one of those, if you have an egg beater, you can use that, or you can try a whisk, but it does take a lot without either the egg beater or the stick blender. Few final things. You want the scale here, a kitchen scale. Will measure in ounces or grams and fractions of grams so that you can get the exact amount that you need. You'll also want your molds. Today we're using a heart mold, and I can give you a link where we got this too. It's a silicone mold, so it releases real easily. If you use something like a muffin tin, it will be very hard to get the soap out because it'll actually adhere to the sides and it doesn't flex, whereas this one you can pop it right out. We also use these cookie cooling racks here, and we do that to help our soap cure, and we actually put it in the oven for a little bit just to help speed the curing process. So there's two different methodologies to that. You can also put it in the freezer if you don't want it to go through a gel phase. We do like to go through the gel phase, so that's what we're doing. Finally, safety. So we're going to be wearing gloves. You can use these thin kind of medical looking gloves, or you can use the thicker cleaning gloves that you'd find kind of in kitchen cleaning aisle dishwashing gloves. And glasses. These are great. So you'll be pouring lye into water and that water lye mixture into the oil, so it's great to just you know, safety first, make sure you're not getting any burns. That's the primary reason for the gloves and the glasses. With that, I would suggest you don't wear your nicest clothes. You can tell I'm kind of wearing loungy pants, an old t-shirt. If you spill this on yourself, the lye will stain. It may eat through your clothes. The oils will stain, so just make sure you're not wearing your nicest stuff. Otherwise, it's a pretty easy process, so we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, first thing we're going to do is start measuring out our oils. With any scale, you're going to want to zero out your pan or your pot here that you're putting it in. We're going to start with our coconut. We'll be listing all of our measurements in grams. It seems like it's a little bit easier to get closer to your target on. Light that up for you. You generally want to be pretty accurate with the oils here, even more accurate with the water and the lye. That's the more chemically active part of the portion. So here we're shooting for about 170 grams, so we're a little bit over. I'm going to take a couple pieces out here, down to 172.
And this is why you should always start with your solid oils before your liquid oils, or measure them out separately before combining.
Alright, 170. So we're going to zero that out. Start back at 0 here. We're going next to our palm oil, and we're going to shoot for 204. Notice I'm wearing just a pair of nitrile gloves. Keeps the oils are inert and a great little skin moisturizer. However, you don't want to be putting gloves on over the top of oily hands, so I just start with them on for when we're handling the lye later. So we'll start here with our palm, and I'm going to kind of push the coconut oil over just to one edge. Again, if you over measure, it's easier to keep the two separated. They'll all be melting together here, no problem. So, as you'll see, coconut oil is quite a bit harder than the palm oil, so it's a little bit harder to get out of the actual container. Might take a little bit more time to kind of chip it out, so to speak, or might need to get a little sharper instrument. So we're at 219 there. We're shooting for 204. Kind of break some of these pieces apart, whatever wants to come with. 206. Just get a little bit more. There we go, 204. Alright, so now we're going to be going to our liquid oil, which is the olive oil. I'm going to take a brief second to wipe my hands off, just so we don't get a bunch of our instruments and stuff here dirty. So you'll want to do a nice slow pour with this. We're shooting for 306. Make sure we zero out our scale again. You'll kind of get the feel for how quickly the scale is going up as you're pouring it. We'll see how close we can get here. Again, we stress the precision, but you know, with some of these oils, it's not as critical to hit the exact number. It's going to be more important with the lye and the water. So now that we have our oils put together, we're going to take this over to the stove and just start heating it. When you're combining all of your soaps, you're going to want to be around that 110 to 125 Fahrenheit. So you'll just want to start it at kind of a nice light low temperature here, maybe a 1, 2, feel out your stove, but this isn't something you want to forget about and come back and find that your oil is at 220 degrees. While not necessarily bad for the oil, it will take a really long time to cool back down when you mix your lye and your water. So now coming over to our lye portion. Again, lye, very dangerous chemical. You want to treat it with caution. So like I say, eye protection, make sure that you're mixing in a chemically safe dish, something like this Pyrex or something that you wouldn't mind being ruined, because it is used to or chemically etch, burn, those different types of things. So next we're going to look at our water here. We're looking for 258. And this, a little bit messier, but because it's a single ingredient at this point, we can always suck some out if we need to. Alright, look at that. Alright, so now again with our lye, as the lye mixes with the water, it's going to chemically react. It's going to produce a, not sure if it's carbon dioxide gas, but it's going to be a very harsh caustic fume that's going to come out of it. So you don't want to have your head anywhere near this area. You want to be in a generally larger, more ventilated room. The dish will also get very warm, so make sure you're not setting it on a surface that you could damage. Just keep in mind a couple of those things while you're starting that. So we're looking for 96 grams of lye. You'll want to just kind of start pouring this over it. As the lye pours in here, if you have another person to help you out, wouldn't hurt to stir this a little bit during this process because it kind of forms into a plate. And you'll have to kind of break that up as to complete the reaction. I'll just keep adding a little bit more here. You'll always want to underlie your soap versus overlie it, because you'll get a chance that you won't consume all of the lye with your soap oils and create those fatty esters. So now that we've got that started, very carefully move this over to our glass stove top. You don't have to worry about it getting too warm. We're going to grab just a simple kitchen utensil here, and you can kind of see the plate that forms with the lye. So you'll just want to try and very kind of gently swirl this around to make sure that all of that lye is being reacted or consumed in the water. Again, be careful of the any fumes that are going to come off of this in this initial process where the lye is mixing with the water. And as this occurs, it will generate a lot of heat. We'll probably see about 140 Fahrenheit out of this. You can see a little bit of the steam already building up against the glass edge. So the trick to making good soap is combining at the proper temperature. A lot of times that's going to be the hardest part, is getting both of these ingredients to occur at roughly that 115 to 125 range. Again, check your recipe. Some fragrances will burn off at those higher temperatures, so you need to actually lower your temperature of mixing. However, that's more difficult because then the soap tends to set up a lot faster.
So if you're adding colorants that will accelerate your trace, aim for 125 versus the 110 to make sure you still have time to get it into a mold.
And we'll show you guys here an example of just how hot things are getting. We'll just take our basic thermometer here. We'll let it set for a little bit. This is just after mixing it. You can see we're up in 144. We'll probably clear 150. So you can imagine this is going to take a little bit of time to cool down. This is going to take a little bit of time to heat up. I don't like applying heat to the water and lye mixture. I just like to let this try and cool down on its own and just kind of nurse the oils around their temperature. So you may need to move the oil off the burner, let it sit without heat being applied to it, and then as you wait for this to cool down. So we'll check back in a little bit here when we mix these two together and go to trace. Alright, welcome back. We've got roughly our two ingredients pretty well close to temperature here. Again, kind of the trick of trying to get both of these to come together at the same time. While you're waiting for that, a great idea is to turn your oven on to warm, about 150 degrees. Once you get it there, we'll be moving our molds into that to help them for that first initial cure. You don't want it too hot, otherwise you'll start boiling your soap. So once you reach that temperature, go ahead and shut it off. The residual heat in the system will help it. So we're at about 118 on our lye here, which is a little bit lower, but it's also a much smaller volume compared to the entire system. Again, you're trying to bring these together fairly close. We're going to be right around 120, 125 by the time this tops out here on our oil. Again, With this batch we've made before, we've had some issues of it starting to trace and gel earlier, so we're going to try and elevate our temperatures a little bit. That will buy us a little bit more time. Our house is also colder, so keep those things in mind. Again, with all your proper safety gear so you don't get any splashes or things popping up as you start to combine the lye water mixture with the oil. You can see in there our fatty esters already starting to generate as the two meet each other. We'll take our stick blender. Also keep in mind any colorants or fragrances, you're going to want to have those at the ready here for adding once you kind of reach that lighter trace. So we'll start with our stick blender. As you can see, we've got a nice good color as we're mixing those oils. Keep in mind you're watching the fluidness. Another thing to kind of keep an eye on is how the bubbles are sticking. You can see how they're starting to embed in the surface. That means we're starting to get closer here. Just a little bit more. You can see how you're starting to develop little ripples and surface texture. We're going to add our fragrance now so we can get a little bit of blend time on it, but we're getting very close to our heavier trace. Trying to get our nice fragrance mixed in there. Do our best to tap off our blender. Let's set that down on the stove and we'll go to our molds. So keeping in mind what kind of mold you're making, ideally if you can keep this a little bit thicker, as you can see it's already starting to turn into more of a paste, almost a glue-like substance, and it will continue. That reaction of the lye and the oils coming together here will continue, and it'll only kind of get faster as you go, so it'll become harder to work with. So if you have help, this is a great time for somebody to kind of chase you with another rubber spatula and kind of tap out any air bubbles that are showing up. You can also experiment with different additives to try and reduce the presence of air. Alcohol in a little spray bottle will also help break the surface tension and relieve some of those air drops depending on what kind of a mold or finish you're trying to get. Alright, now we've got our molds prepped. We'll just be placing them right in here in the oven.
How long should we wait to unmold them?
You want to wait about a day or two. Depends on your recipe a little bit, depends on how warm it is, but you'll see that they'll actually start to turn hard and they'll no longer stick to the inside of the mold, especially if you're using a silicone mold. But you can gently kind of peel it back, and if it seems to be separating freely, I'd check in on it at about a day and a half, 2 days. Thanks for joining us with soap, and hopefully it will turn out well, and we'll show you guys what it looks like at the end.